Bruce Lee very famously attacked traditional martial arts as useless, and he talked about what he called the classical mess. And he argued that, there was just a lot of stuff in traditional martial arts that was simply useless. And, things like, well, why would you do this? You're exposing your whole body and this takes too long. And meanwhile, you're getting punched 5 times. And so he develops Jeet Kune Do as a response to that. So Bruce Lee's whole notion was the traditional martial arts are terrible, they're useless, how did they even survive all these years? We need to fix them, and so here's how we do it. And so he comes up with Jeet Kune Do, and it's a fix. My teacher, Sensei Dillman, had a kind of different approach, and it's one that appealed to me. See, I came from a traditional background. I was a traditionalist. I remember reading Bruce talking about the classical mess, and even though his argument made sense, why would you do this? I still had this feeling that there had to be a reason why these arts survived for so long. There had to be something going on there that wasn't just a bunch of garbage. It had to be something real and practical and effective, and maybe I just didn't understand it. And at the time, I just assumed, well, I just haven't trained long enough, which, let me say, is kind of a dumb idea. You see, if the martial art that you're in is one you have to train for 20 years before you can actually use it, that seems kind of foolish to me. You should be able to use it pretty quickly, or it's not worth doing. I mean, it should be worth training for 20 years or 40 or whatever, but at the same time, it should be practical enough that you can use it pretty fast. It shouldn't take you a long time to go, hey, no, that makes sense. I can do that. I'll do that. But I had that feeling that the traditional arts had to have survived for as long as they did because there was something of value there, and I just wasn't sure what it was. So if you actually were to go back and look at really, really old issues of Black Belt magazine from the early 80s, most of the time I'm writing about kata, about traditional forms, trying to give a rational explanation for why that makes sense. In some sense, in response to Bruce Lee's criticism. But my teacher, Sensei Dillman, fortunately taught, first by Hon Soken and then by Seiyo Oyata, was taught that here's where the classical mess comes from. It's not really a classical mess. It's really a traditional mess. See, classical martial arts are effective. They're battlefield arts. That's what they're for. And everything they do from the approach of what works on the battlefield, here's why we do it. Traditional martial arts become about preserving some kind of tradition because that's how it's always been done, whatever that means. And so just they sort of pass it on. And so they ask a different question. So the traditionalist asks the question, how is this done? What's the correct way to do this movement? And the traditionalist says, Sensei or Shifu, what is this for? And Shifu says, oh, this is for this. That seems weird. That does not really seem like a thing to do. Like, I don't know. Is that really effective? That's what we were taught. It's traditional. It's traditional becomes the answer. The idea of classical is something else. Classical asks a different question. So the traditionalist says, what is the correct way to do this move? The classicalist says, what is this move for? What is this move for? Let me find a practical, useful application for this movement that makes sense, that it is in response to an actual realistic attack. I mean, Oizuki, right? How many people actually attack that way in real life? So why do we practice defending it like this? Like, I'm going to defend against Oizuki because that's how people attack. People don't attack that way. So a realistic attack, how does this move respond to a realistic attack? And then how do I train that? And then how do I practice that when I'm alone, which is what ultimately kata or forms is for. To practice the move when you're alone, to visualize it and to practice it, but it has to make sense. That classical approach, that's the approach that Sensei Dillman had. Now, I was actually working on some of that stuff before I met Sensei Dillman. There's old articles where you see me doing the beginnings of what you would call kata bunkai, where I'm actually trying to come up with, can I say, alternative applications, things that make more sense, that are maybe more useful, that are more practical. I was missing a lot at the time, but hey, you got to start somewhere. And that meant that when I did meet Sensei Dillman, I recognized what he was doing, and I knew right away, this is why I couldn't get there. This is why my techniques always felt like they were close but no cigar, because I didn't understand this other element, this pressure point element. So I can look at traditional arts and I can see the flaws in them, and I can conclude that the art is useless. Or I can look at that traditional art and I can conclude that the way it's being explained is wrong, but that the art itself is correct. That's the classical approach. I'm a classical martial artist as a result. Many years ago, I was teaching a seminar, and I was teaching basic application to basic, what we call ukewaza, or what are called blocking techniques. In the seminar, I think we covered down block, though I say down counter. Middle block, I say middle counter. I know we did at least 3 or 4 basic techniques, And so I looked at one of the guys who was there, he had a school, he was a teacher of a school, and I said, well, what do you teach, what have you taught as the application for this technique? And he looked at me and he said, we don't do that move, we got rid of them because they didn't work, but I'm going to put them back. I'm Chris Thomas. These are some reflections from the master class. Thanks for watching. Now go train.